Have you ever observed silence? Not the silence that arises when the noise ends, not the interval between two musical notes, nor the moment of rest after a tiring day, but the silence that doesn't depend on any circumstance. There is a silence that is born not from will, but from understanding, and it is about this silence that I want to talk to you. When you're alone, without a book, without a phone, without anything to distract your mind, what happens? The mind begins to talk to itself. It relives memories, plans for tomorrow, justifies, compares, condemns, desires. It constructs images and gets lost in them. But if you observe patiently, without rejecting what you see, something remarkable happens. The observation itself begins to silence the observer. The chattering mind, which always tries to assert itself, justify itself, protect itself, begins to empty itself. And in this emptying, silence arises, not as a goal, but as a perfume that spreads naturally when the flower opens. Do you understand what I mean? True silence is not cultivated. Everything that is cultivated is a product of time, and time belongs to thought. And thought, being limited, can never touch the limitless. Most people believe that meditation is something that is practiced, sitting in a certain posture, repeating sacred words, controlling the breath, disciplining the mind. But all this belongs to the realm of effort. And where there is effort, there is conflict. Meditation then becomes a refined form of inner struggle. And where there is struggle, silence is impossible. Do you realize? Effort is a form of violence. When you try to force the mind to be still, it rebels like a child that has been repressed too much. But if you simply observe the mind without imposing anything on it, it becomes curiously calm. Not because you forced it, but because observation is understanding, and understanding dissolves noise. Meditation, therefore, is not a means to achieve silence. Silence is the beginning of meditation. It is the fertile ground where pure perception flourishes. It is the space where thought moves without leaving a trace, where the observer and the observed disappear into mindfulness. But attention is not concentration. Concentration is exclusive. It closes, limits, focuses on one point, and excludes the rest. Attention is inclusive. It encompasses everything: the distant sound of a bird, the beating of one's own heart, the breath, the thought that arises and disappears. In this attentiveness, nothing is rejected, nothing is chosen. What is seen completely ends completely. When the mind is attentive, thought finds its natural place. It becomes a useful tool, not the master. But when thought dominates, there is noise, there is conflict, fear, desire, comparison, and in the center of this noise, silence is buried. So the question is, can thought recognize its own limit? Can the mind perceive that thought is always old, a product of experience, of memory, of the past, and that the new, the living, the immeasurable can only arise when the old ceases to interfere? Have you ever observed a sunset without naming it, without saying how beautiful? In that instant, there is only seeing, pure seeing. No center that says, I am seeing. Experience and the experiencer disappear, and only experience exists. This state is meditation. Meditation is seeing without the veil of time. It is living the present moment without the weight of yesterday or the dream of tomorrow. And when there is this total clarity, silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a living, vibrant energy that permeates everything that exists. But look, this silence is not something that can be sought. Seeking is noise. All seeking implies desire. Desire to achieve, to become, to possess. And desire is the movement of the self. Where there is the self, there is no silence. So perhaps meditation is the end of the self, not the annihilation of an entity, but the end of an illusory process. The self is constructed by thought, and thought is limited. When this limitation is perceived deeply, not theoretically, the self dissolves like a shadow that disappears with the sunset, and what remains is silence, uncreated, unmeasured, unsought. Can you feel it now? Don't try to understand with your mind, just listen. Listen to the space between these words. There is music in this space. There is a stillness that belongs to no one. This is the field of pure consciousness. Consciousness without choice, without direction, without a center. And when this pure consciousness exists, everything is seen as it truly is. The beautiful and the ugly, the noble and the vulgar, love and fear, everything is included in this vision. And to see is to act. There is no separation between understanding and transforming. When you see danger, you act immediately. Similarly, when you see the nature of thought, it loses its power. Therefore, true meditation is living without resistance, without choice, without effort. It is living with a mind as clear as the sky after the storm, where all the clouds are seen and none are held back. And in this vast space of silence, there is love. Not love for attachment, nor love for pleasure, but something immeasurable that is born when thought ends. Have you ever watched your mind as you might watch the flow of a river, without trying to stop it, without attempting to guide it, simply watching it move? When you watch in this way, the river tells its own story. It murmurs, it rushes, it deepens, and then becomes still again. And your mind is not so different. The mind moves through channels carved by habit and memory. It follows old patterns, endlessly repeating what is known. And yet in the very act of watching, something extraordinary takes place. The watcher and the watched are not two separate things. There is only observation, and in that pure observation, time comes to a stop. Time, not the clock's time, but psychological time, is born when thought says, I will become. That movement of becoming is the root of restlessness. It is the noise that prevents silence. When you want to become something, more spiritual, more peaceful, more enlightened, you have already moved away from what is. So meditation begins when all becoming ends. It begins when you are utterly still. Not still because you forced yourself to be, but still because you have seen the futility of movement. You see, silence is not opposed to sound. Silence contains sound. It holds all things. The cry of a child, the call of a bird, the hum of the city, the whisper of your own thoughts. It does not reject, it embraces. And in that embrace, every sound, every thought, every feeling finds its right place. Meditation is not the path to silence. Meditation is silence. It is the unfolding of awareness without a center, and when there is no center, there is no boundary. Awareness, then, is like the sky, boundless, vast, untouched by the passing clouds. But our minds are filled with clouds, are they not? Clouds of opinion, judgment, comparison, belief. We are so occupied with what we should be that we have no space to see what we are. And what we are, if seen without distortion, reveals something far more immense than all our ideals combined. So perhaps meditation is not an activity at all. It is not something to be done. It is something to be understood. When understanding flowers, doing has no meaning. There is only being, a state of effortless observation, where the mind, the heart, and the body move in harmony. In that state, even ordinary things, the shadow of a leaf trembling on the wall, the laughter of a stranger, the scent of rain on dry earth, they all become gateways to the sacred. But to discover the sacred, the mind must be free of the seeker. Because the seeker, in essence, is the sought. The one who chases truth creates the illusion of distance. And truth is not something to be reached. It is here now, waiting in the stillness between two thoughts. Do you ever notice that space? Between two thoughts there is a pause, a gap, fleeting, delicate, yet full of meaning. If you can observe that gap without effort, without trying to prolong it, you will find that it begins to expand naturally. And in that expansion, the mind touches something eternal. That is not the product of imagination. Imagination belongs to thought. This is not something that can be projected or constructed. It comes when the mind has understood itself completely. And that understanding is not a matter of time. It happens in the very seeing. When you see a snake, there is no interval between seeing and acting. You do not deliberate whether to move away. You move. That action is instantaneous, because the seeing is total. In the same way, when you see the whole nature of thought, its limitations, its restlessness, its fragmentation, it ends naturally. And in that ending, there is silence. So meditation is not about building a bridge towards silence. It is the demolition of everything that prevents it. All the ideas, the images, the hopes, the fears, they fall away. And what remains is vast, immeasurable, untouched. Can you feel it now, this vastness? It is not something external, not something distant. It is here, within and without, inseparable. It is not your awareness or my awareness. It is awareness itself, infinite, without division. And in that infinite stillness, love flowers. Not love as attachment or sentiment, but love that is the fragrance of understanding. Where there is understanding, there is no you and me. There is only the act of perceiving, the act of being. This love has no opposite. It is not born of pleasure or pain. It does not fade with time or change with circumstance. It is eternal, not because it lasts forever, but because it exists outside the realm of time altogether. Such silence is sacred. It is the source of all creation. From it arise all things, and to it all things return. In it there is no division, no separation, no conflict. There is only stillness, living, breathing stillness, and that, my friend, is the beginning of meditation, not the end, the beginning. Because from this silence, life begins anew. Every perception becomes fresh, every relationship becomes a mirror of truth, and every breath is filled with wonder. When you awaken to this silence, life takes on an entirely different meaning. It is no longer a battlefield of desires, fears, and pursuits. It becomes a vast field of observation, where each moment reveals itself in its full beauty and truth. But most of us do not live that way, do we? We live in fragments. The fragment of work, the fragment of family, the fragment of religion, the fragment of ambition. Each fragment fights with the other, each seeking its own continuity, its own satisfaction. And so life becomes a series of conflicts, each masked by the illusion of purpose. Meditation begins when the mind sees this fragmentation as it is, without trying to escape it, without condemning or justifying it. Only then can wholeness emerge. Because wholeness is not something we can construct. It appears only when the broken pieces are seen completely, without the wish to repair them. You see, silence is not the absence of movement. It is movement without friction. It's a river flowing effortlessly around the stones. And when the mind flows in that way, every challenge, every encounter, every sorrow becomes part of its music. In daily life, this means something very simple: to be aware from moment to moment, without judgment, to walk, to eat, to speak, to listen, all with total attention. This attention is not a matter of practice. You cannot train yourself to be aware, because the very effort to train implies inattention. Awareness flowers naturally when you love what you observe. Have you noticed that? When you love a child, you watch every gesture, every smile, every tear, not because you have to, but because your heart is alive to it. Similarly, when the mind is alive to life itself, there is a deep affection in observation, and that affection dissolves the barrier between the observer and the observed. To live that way is to live without center, and to live without center is to live without fear. Fear only exists when there is something to protect at a self-image, a belief, a memory, a conclusion. When the me is absent, fear has no foundation. It disappears like mist under the morning sun. So meditation, then, is the ending of fear. not by suppression, not by analysis, but by understanding its roots. And the root of fear is time. The thought that says, I might lose, or I might not become. When time stops psychologically, fear ends. And in that ending, love and silence are one. Have you ever sat quietly under a tree and simply listened? Listened without trying to interpret what you hear? The rustle of leaves, the song of a bird, the murmur of distant voices, all merging into one symphony of being. If you truly listen, there is no listener, there is only listening, and that listening is meditation. But for most of us, listening has become selective. We listen through the filters of our opinions, our conditioning, our past. We never hear what is, only what we expect or fear to hear. And this selective listening is what keeps us imprisoned in ourselves. To listen purely, to see purely, is to be free. Freedom is not the opposite of bondage. It is the absence of the desire to escape. When you stop trying to become something else, you are free to be. And being is the highest form of meditation. Meditation is not a retreat from the world. It is the understanding of the world. And the world is not outside of you. You are the world. Your anger, your greed, your sorrow, your joy, they are not isolated. They are part of the vast movement of humanity. When you see this, not as an idea, but as a fact, there is compassion. Compassion is not pity. It is not something you cultivate by saying, I must be kind. Compassion arises when you see yourself in another, when you see that their suffering is your own. And from that compassion flows an intelligence beyond thought. That intelligence acts without motive, without calculation. It is the action of love. And love is not separate from silence. It is silence in movement. You see, silence is not an escape from living. It is the ground of living. When the mind is silent, perception becomes pure. You look at a tree, and you see not a tree, not oak or banyan, but a living thing rooted in the same earth that holds you. You see yourself in it, not as a metaphor, but as fact. In that seeing there is no distance. And where there is no distance, there is no conflict, no domination, no exploitation. There is only communion. That communion is sacred, not because it belongs to religion, but because it reveals the indivisibility of life itself. When you live that way, meditation is no longer something you do. It is what you are. You breathe, you walk, you work. And every act becomes a reflection of silence. This is the beauty of awareness. It transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Not by adding anything, but by removing everything unnecessary. So the question is not how to meditate, but whether you can live with such sensitivity that meditation becomes your natural state. When the heart and the mind move together in harmony, when thought has found its right place, when silence pervades even your most trivial actions, then every moment is meditation. And perhaps in that state, death itself is no longer frightening. Because death and life are not separate. They are two movements of the same river. To live fully is to die to each moment as it ends, to let go completely so that the next moment may be born fresh and untainted. That is the essence of meditation. The art of dying to the known so that the unknown may unfold. There is a strange beauty in ending. Not the ending that brings sorrow, but the ending that allows something new to be born. Have you ever watched the day fade into night, the last light slowly dissolving into darkness? In that moment, if you are truly still, there is no resistance to the ending. The day has gone, and the night is simple, complete. In the same way, meditation is the ending of each moment as it happens. It is the death of the known. And in that death, there is an extraordinary renewal, a freshness untouched by thought, untouched by memory. The mind, which is always occupied with continuity, does not understand this beauty. It fears the end because it fears to be nothing. But to be nothing is the beginning of everything. When the mind realizes that it is the noise, it stops trying to silence itself, and in that cessation, silence comes naturally, not the silence of effort, but the silence that has no cause. It has no opposite, no boundary. It is not yours or mine. It simply is. In that silence, all questions end, not because they are answered, but because the need to ask disappears. The observer, the thinker, the experiencer, all dissolve into pure awareness. Awareness without center, without circumference, without movement. This is not an achievement. It cannot be cultivated. No system, no teacher, no method can lead you there. Because the very act of following is the continuation of the self, and the self is the noise. When that truth is seen completely, the seeker ends. And with the ending of the seeker, truth is revealed. Truth is not something mysterious or far away. It is found in the simplicity of direct perception. It is there in the flight of a bird, in the sound of water flowing over stones, in the smile of a stranger, in the quiet movement of your own breath. To see that, to see without distortion, is to be in communion with life. And that communion is sacred. It has nothing to do with belief or ritual. It cannot be contained in words or images. It is a state of complete vulnerability, where the heart is open and the mind is silent. In that openness, love flows naturally. Not the love that depends on another, but love that exists because there is no other. That love has no demand, no fear, no sorrow. It is as still as the depths of the ocean. Yet it moves through all things. It is the essence of creation, and without it silence would have no meaning. So the purpose of meditation, if one can use that word, is not to reach an end, but to live in this sacred movement of silence and love. It is to live without accumulation, without carrying yesterday into today, to see anew each moment as if it were the first, and indeed the last. When you live that way, life itself becomes meditation. Not something apart from your daily existence, not something reserved for a quiet room or a distant monastery. Meditation is walking down the street and seeing the sky reflected in a puddle of water. It is listening to a friend without judgment. It is watching your thoughts arise and vanish like waves on the sea. It is dying to every moment, so that every moment may be born again. Silence, then, is not an escape. It is the essence of awareness, and awareness is the essence of life. Without awareness, we are mechanical, repeating the old patterns of fear and desire. With awareness, everything changes, not through will, but through understanding. And when understanding is complete, action is right. Right action is not born of choice. It is the spontaneous flowering of intelligence. That intelligence is compassion, and compassion is not a sentiment, it is clarity. In clarity there is no conflict, there is only light. Have you ever felt that? A moment when everything stands still, when there is no movement of thought, no division between the seer and the seen. In that stillness there is a vastness beyond all measure. That vastness is pure awareness. You do not reach it. You are it, when the noise of becoming ends. You are that boundless silence which contains all sound, that emptiness which holds the fullness of life. You are the watcher and the watched, the ocean and the drop, the eternal and the transient, all at once. So, let there be silence, not as an idea, but as a living flame within you. Let it burn away all illusions, all fears, all separations. And from that silence, let understanding blossom like a lotus rising from still waters. When the mind is utterly still and the heart is free of all desire, then the sacred is. It is not in temples or scriptures. It is not to be sought. It is to be seen, and it is seen only in silence. Remain with that silence. Do not pursue it, do not define it, do not hold on to it. Let it move through you, as the wind moves through the trees, as light moves across the water, as love moves without reason. Then you will find that meditation is not the path, it is the arrival at what has never departed, the timeless, the infinite, the nameless. And when you have touched that, even for a moment, life is never the same again. For in that moment there is no beginning and no end, only the stillness of pure awareness, and in that stillness you are free.